Hello, my friends, and good time of day to all of you. Here on the Internet Chess Club, this is Grandmaster Alex Yermolinsky. Welcome, welcome, welcome. What every Russian schoolboy knows live. Well, we're going through a very interesting month now in April 2017. Tournaments follow one after another. I even get to do my shows more often. Normally they're scheduled for once in 2 weeks, but it's the second week in a row, second Thursday in a row. I'm very happy to be here with you. Now, we talked about the US Championship. Obviously, that was early in the month, and then that was in the books. Of course, great victory for Wesley So over there. But Wesley didn't make any rating gains. If you remember, the US Championship was kind of a rating graveyard. And what's interesting is that affected almost like across the board every top player. I will begin with Magnus Carlsen because he played the Grenka tournament, which we talked about last week. How Magnus was so-so. And I would like to show something to your attention now. I have to switch. Now I have a change of plan. Let's talk about Magnus and his tournament at Grenka. Of course, Grenka finished with convincing victory for Levon Aronian. He barely missed winning 5 games in a row. You know that, right? He was winning against Caruana in the last round. And he already clinched first place. By then. Okay, so let me get the hang on a second. Okay, let me get the Grenka thing up there. Are you guys even there? Hello? Oh, Moving Dutchman. Good to see you. I'm still trying. I want to get a game of Magnus up there. Yeah. Actually, only the end of it. I mean, the story about Magnus, obviously, well, you may disagree with me. You should disagree with me. But it's like, let's look at the facts. Some 5 or maybe even 6 years ago, when Magnus started winning tournaments one after another. He wasn't even world champion then, but he was already #1 rated player. And I remember his great triumphs in China in particular, in many tournaments. It's like Magnus was winning 2 tournaments out of 3. And while Wesley So wasn't there, granted, but essentially the crowd was the same. Caruana joined in very quickly. And Nakamura was always there, and of course Kramnik, Anand, and Topalov, and Aronian, they were all there. Yet Magnus showed absolute tournament domination over his opposition. If there was any talk, guys, the talk was about how soon before Magnus hits 2900. I think his highest rating was 2889. Not that far off, right? Only 11 points. In Magnus's case, of course, it would mean winning not 1 game and not 2 games, winning 3 games against pretty strong opposition, but he seemed to be poised to do this. We're looking at live rating now, and Magnus is what? 2837? It's probably lowest that he's been in years. There is still a gap between him and the second guy. We'll talk about who the second guy is in a moment. Oh, this hat. Oh, it's Shields. Shields. It's a sporting goods store here in town. Well, I spent some time outside today, and honestly, I'm not sure. Well, anyway, didn't have a chance to take my shoes off, then came back, there was work to do. Anyways, so keep the hat on. No particular message there, just the hat I like because it's comfortable. Some Magnus is ahead of the second guy by what? By some 20 points maybe. At some moment when Wesley was at his highest, which may have been 28-19, I may be off, that then the margin was only 18 points. And, okay, that's one indication. Ratings do mean something. Well, secondly, when Magnus wins tournaments, and he won some, it's not like, actually last year he won a lot of tournaments. For the first time he won Norway Classic, and he won some other events. He won Bilbao, that's where he defeated Wesley, so some other tournaments. He did well. He had 5 tournament victories, I think. But those didn't come easy, right? Well, by small Karpov-like margin of just half a point. That's how it was. Now, what is it that stops Magnus from scoring as heavily as he used to? Did his opposition become stronger? No, their own ratings don't indicate that. They basically play a game of musical chairs. One guy surges forward, alright, so it was Aronian for a long time. Some not successful tournaments, particularly the candidates events, dropped him down finally. At some moment, Levon was out of top 10. He was, I think, at 2760. Then there was Caruana on the strength of his tremendous 7 out of 7 start at the second Singfield Cup. But that's already a long time ago. Then Fabiana, never got that far. He was, I think, at 2840. Now Fabiana, after the US Championship and not so convincing start at the Grenka tournament, temporarily left the 2800 territory. Then there was MVL who showed great promise until about a year ago, maybe even a little bit more, until last summer. And we really looked at MVL to make a great push, but somehow his luck changed and he didn't play very convincingly since the summer. Oh, Kramnik's floating around somewhere, but okay, it's understandable. But these guys didn't get better ultimately. Their ratings don't indicate. Now, what's Magnus's normal margin of his lead in rating? I think it used to be like 60 points. Alright, so 60 points. Maybe even 70. Let's say 70 points. No, he was like 70 points. Okay, maybe the second guy would be a little closer, but the bunch of them was 70 points. Now, suppose Magnus come to play another tournament and he's 70 points above the average rating, right? Oh, no, you didn't interrupt anything. Oh, so 70 points. All right, let's do a little calculation to see his projected result. Now, that's 60%. All right. Is Magnus good to score 60% in a tournament? All right, 5.5 out of 9. Okay, that's 5.4 out of 9. I think he's still good for that. But the problem is that the average opposition is not at 28-20 or 28-30. It's not completely Magnus's fault that he cannot get to 2900. His opponents, people he plays in every tournament, they're just not there. They're not in the 28-40 territory. Then Magnus is well comfortable with scoring his 60%. All right. I know you can tell me that he had done way better than 60%. Okay, let's address this. So he's playing MVL. You have this on the board. I skipped the preliminaries here. It was a typical Magnus game. He played a quiet line of Queen D3 against MVL Snyder. Obviously, Magnus has no interest of going into that English attack or whatever the sharp lines MVL played. Like what MVL played against Nakamura and against Anish Giri, his famous games. So it was more a typical Magnus. Geller Karpov favored classical line bishop e2 here and there, some advantage, and then quickly Magnus trades pieces and goes to the endgame. What else is new? And now it gets this position. Alright, what are white's advantages? Structure-wise, if you only look at the pawns, it could go either way easily. Imagine that rook sitting on c1 somewhere and black manages to go knight e8 and knight d6. That's gonna be black who will play for a win. Magnus is good at that. He understands the dynamic factors of, particularly of the endgame, like no one else. So the rook on c6, it simply cannot be tolerated. The only way black can keep this pawn on c5 is to keep the rook on c8 and keep it protected by the other rook. Knight d7 will almost never help and only make things worse, because the formerly bad bishop, or restricted bishop, would be able to come out from g4 with decisive effect. So Magnus plays this move, bishop d3. Well, the problem is that he wants to come to f5, right? Clearly. So that would force the issue. But in reply comes e4. Okay, Magnus saw that. He moves the bishop the other way to support the c6 square. Alright, MVL takes. Bishop goes over there. And then comes king f8. Now, Magnus's magic was not only in his ability to find best moves in positions like this. In the more simpler kind of positions, more often in the endgame than in the middle game. Although he's not a bad middle game player, of course, don't get me wrong. But his ultimate strength was to be able to win endgames like this, almost every time. One way or another. Magnus magic. Things just work out for him. And he tries. He plays this move, which secures the bishop. And then he swings his rook out wide to use the a-file. Okay, I give credit to his opponent. MVL, he knew it was coming, nothing was surprising him, and he plays the right move. It's actually a counter-attacking move. He's thinking of bringing this knight to e5 and attacking the pawn on c6. White is entering this fight down a piece. Oh, did you hear me right? Down a piece. What piece? What's amiss? The white king. It's not there. Obviously, one can dream. You put that king on b6, white will win this game for sure. But it's not only the long journey, there are also obstacles. And we will see these obstacles. And Magnus, it's really magic that he finds a way of fighting with just two pieces, his rook and bishop, versus the superior army that involves the king. A king is a strong piece in the endgame, we all know that. As a matter of fact, it was estimated as at 4 points, so it's actually right between rook and minor piece in its strength. Obviously, you don't use this point value in your calculations, because you cannot lose your king, you cannot trade it, but as far as the sheer strength of the piece, ability to control squares, attack and so on, defend too, the king is ranked right there, 4 points. Yet Magnus finds it. So the rook on the 7th, okay? So for now, black had to protect the king side. Obviously, it wouldn't be wise, from black's point of view, to give up 2 pawns there and try to win the pawn on c6. In the end, he would be down a pawn. If anything, white uses the c6 pawn as decoy. He hopes that it'll occupy black's attention and can get something, but no, well, MVL refuses to accommodate. He plays this. Now f3. f3 is played with the idea of opening a path for the white king to come to the center. This was played, and now f4. And we have a big question. Capture, right? The rook pins the knight. Now we see already the glimpses of Magnus's plan, and it's a great plan. When we look at this position, we realize that there is no way black can get out of this mess. He's simply unable to unpin. The king either stays on d6 or d7. Either square creates a pin, either by the white rook or by the white bishop. Black is not losing that knight, right? White simply cannot bring another piece to attack the knight on c6. So you guys follow me? I find this interesting. But black also is not in zugzwang, because he can endlessly shuffle his rook between the square c8 and c7. So what is white's winning plan? We shouldn't forget that he's down a pawn. Only under very favorable circumstances he can transition to king and pawn endgame. I think white here would start with the move f5. Yeah, the pawn goes a little far away from the white king, but that's totally okay. You played g6. I'm probably just gonna ignore it. And now white's idea is to come up with the king, grab this pawn, and at the right moment, when he's ready, he will trade on c6, trade off everything, win both pawns on the f-file, and probably just already outflank the black king for the c-pawn. Or possibly he could go for the h-pawn to win the race. Black has to be aware of that, and in my opinion, if this position was reached, then g takes f5 would be a losing error. White does better by playing this. But I'm not sure he can completely succeed. That pawn is gonna go to f6. What it does now, it prevents the black pawn from supporting the pawn on g5 and making it into a truly protected passed pawn. We kind of look ahead at this pawn endgame, right? Hi, Alexei. 206. Now the white king is looking for this path between the pawns. Obviously, this can be played. Now white brings the king forward. And we have a situation where black shouldn't be moving any of the pawns, right? If he does this, then the white king gets this path or that path, you choose. But after h4, white can come to g4. So black can only wait. Now, we can imagine this position with white's turn to play. And also with black's turn to play. So suppose, in this situation, clearly, the white can come to e4 because there is no check from e7. Next, the king appears on f5, and then it gobbles up the pawns, and then at the right moment, everything's going to be traded on c6. I mean, this is so Magnus. It's just great stuff. I mentioned also that suppose, we have a different situation and say in this position, immediately g5 is played. f6 will be the answer anyway. Now we start matching up our moves. And now, if king comes to e4, then there is this check. And then you make seemingly decisive penetration, only to be surprised by intermediate checkmate. I love the term intermediate checkmate. Gets right in a Cuts right through, right in the middle of your plans. All right. But guys, well, we can wait, right? We can wait. One little move with the rook. Now, what's black to do? If he does this, then king e4 and there is no e7 square. If king goes to d7, then the king comes up. And you still got that check, right? Still, I cannot go forward. I get mated from e5, either way. I was actually thinking of this. Now, how does Magnus work these positions out? The most important thing is he said himself during the World Championship match with Karyakin. When Karyakin defended some tough endgame down a pawn, it was early in the match, game 3, whatever, I don't remember. And somebody said, oh, Magnus, there's a fortress here. And Karyakin says, yeah, fortress. Magnus looked at them and said, I don't believe in fortresses. All right, that's not ignorance. That's actually his philosophy. Magnus believes that if he keeps his opponent down and without any possibility of counterplay, that's an advantage in itself. Yes, indeed, it may not bring a win in every game, but in some percentage of cases, maybe in large percentage of cases, it would bring him a win. Either it would be enough because he finds something later on, or because the opponent cannot stand the pressure and eventually makes a mistake. So Magnus always plays like this. He says, I don't believe in fortresses. Now, would he be able to break through this fortress? I'm not quite sure. Because if the black rook stays there on the back rank, and yeah, like this, and the king goes to d7, then maybe it's a draw. But maybe not. I mean, for example, let's look at this ridiculous stuff. Before you guys start laughing at me that your resident Russian schoolboy cannot count pawns and goes to a bad king and pawn endgame, let's just see this. How bad is this king and pawn endgame? I want to see a strategy here with black. What do you do? I wonder. Do you go around my c pawn to capture it? Do you have the time? There, I take, there. Allow me to ignore the h-pawn. My f-pawn is more advanced. I'm the only one who's gonna get the queen in this game. You won't. White wins. Do I want to take the knight with rook early? Well, I don't know. I don't know if I want. I would like to... I mean, I think this is the right moment, Alexei, to do this. When the black king is on d7, I want to take at the moment when he's pinned, because he won't have a better move than king d6. After all, I am threatening to play king d5 and simply decide the game. And here, okay, let's try going the other way. Now I take. I am on the h5 pawn. So you play this, I take. We have two possibilities. One is this. I can go after the f-pawn, or I can try to queen my h-pawn. Somehow I believe that queening of the h-pawn is a better plan. Because when we both get our new queens, and we will, right? Oh, I should not have gone to g5. That was my mistake. I shouldn't walk into the check. I must do this. King c4, h4. King d5. There. It's amazing to analyze this. But Magnus plays for things like this. And now, suddenly, check. Well, you can't step on the c file, right? Maybe you step here. Now, queen e7, check. Looks like you're gonna lose that pawn with check. White will win with the f pawn, all things being equal, if there is no immediate perpetual check. Perhaps black can play better. Maybe he can play this. But still, you run away. Are you sure you have the perpetual? I think not. I think the white king will find its way over there, and eventually I'll cover with the queen, and we'll get the usual procedure where the f-pawn, theoretically speaking, is winning. I don't see how black can isolate the white king into the area away from the pawn. Usually when the king joins with the pieces, queen and pawn, then the checks run out. So perhaps, Magnus counted on that. Alright, suppose this whole thing would happen in the game. I almost swear, if this was played in, 2013 or somewhere, Magnus would have won the game, just like this. And we would all say, brilliant. What recognition, what deep insight. No computers can match this. Computers, all computers can see here is that white cannot lose because of the eternal pin. And they give 0, 0, 0, 0. To look this far, you need to give your computer more time, put it this way. To come up with the concept of this kind of temporary exchange sacrifice, to go to the king and pawn endgame at the moment when you're still down a pawn, well, I don't know. Obviously today computers, if you run them on a strong enough hardware and give them enough time, they can find anything, even 30 moves long. But most of the time it's not the computers we refer to. We refer to an engine, that's softly whirring somewhere on the background while we're watching, 6 games at a time. And their capability is rather limited. They're still probably good enough to beat anybody in Blitz, but no, they don't see really that far. So, then we would have this great victory by Magnus Carlsen. Okay. We will take it for granted because Magnus had done it before. He will do it again. But this is 2017 now. What's the difference? He didn't play knight takes c6. I repeat, this position, that's exactly what Magnus wanted. Obviously, we're not playing f6, and if you don't play anything with the pawns, the white king travels to h5 with the idea of this push f6 to break up the pawns. Win h6 and then go to the king and pawn endgame. Okay, looks drawish. Okay, prove it. Where's the draw? You show me where draw is here after f5. I personally don't see it. Or at least I'm not that sure about it. That was Magnus's magic. He would willingly enter those seemingly drawish positions and then he would win. Why? A. He would leave no stone unturned. He would look at everything. B. He's strong and he can survive any battles of any length. Usually he's ahead on the clock. The opponent gets tired defending. Sometimes there would be a win, sometimes it would require one more mistake. The mistakes would come often. Oh well. Where is the win? I'm just showing to you. My king comes to h5. Then I'm gonna push f6. Everything is there with arrows. And then I'm gonna trade down the right moment. Trade down and win the king and pawn endgame with my passed pawn on h-file. Yeah. No, well, that's the main thing for Magnus. Only white advances, only white has ideas, and he takes those positions. That was recipe for his success. I know he won some other games, attack, counter-attack. He's not one-dimensional player, but big chunk of his wins came exactly in this fashion. If you don't believe me, or you have databases. f6 is a breakthrough. Repeat. I will bring my king to h5 and play f6. The arrows are written on the board. You have to defend against this plan. I want to hear more than words. I want to hear one line. Here. So you wait it out, I come up. You wait it out, I come up. I will not leave this position until everyone present here is convinced that black is playing for a win. Where was this from? This was the last round of the Grenke Classic tournament played in Germany in a resort town of Karlsruhe near Baden-Baden, that great area. And you see the players' names. That's the threat. Okay, so you wait. Alright, you're not mating me, right? So I can first grab this guy. I don't care for this check, it's just check. Then I can bide my time. I will come around while you people sitting there idly. I'll come around, I'll do this, I will grab that. Okay, that's convincing enough. At the right moment I take, when it's needed. What happened, that MVO plays this. He actually spent some time here. I gotta give credit to Maxim. He puts the knight on d4. Seemingly, no, what can the knight do? It's obviously not taken on b5. That's suicidal. So he's taken on c6, right? You'll see the difference. Magnus comes up. Takes. You must pin him, right? Now came the key move, f5. The difference was that MVL did not allow the white pawn to come to f5. It was simply not possible until the last moment. You can say here, oh, you want to play on this, came knight takes c6, you want to play f5 here, you can't, because he takes with check, and then he escapes the pin with the knight. And white has nothing to show for two lost pawns. We already analyzed g6 to trying to keep the king away. White then moves the king up, puts the pawn to f6. I don't know, I'm not sure. Maybe there is no win there. But it's good enough for Magnus. And he knew that he could have some improvements. I probably agree with you. The pawn absolutely has to stay on g6. But it doesn't guarantee a draw. Let's put it this way. Yeah, so this wouldn't have worked. So he had to do this game of 5. What MVL did, he really created a barrier on the path of the white king. Obviously, you have these two sets of pawns blocking each other, and there is no room in between to go through. Maybe Magnus wasn't really too discouraged, because the main feature of the position is the inability of black to get out of the pin is still present. So he had a backup plan. If not through the center, maybe through the king's side. MVL is alert. He plays this. Now Magnus says, alright, now we've taken care of the king's side, right? It's frozen. Now I come the other way. and he comes the other way. He comes to this position. Alright, there were some lines to calculate, and besides, truth to tell, Magnus didn't have a whole lot of options from that endgame position. I think he did the best he could. And he's sitting there looking at this position and thinking, okay, now I'm gonna win the game, right? Time to trade, and then outflank the king. Seemingly, the 2 pawns safely hold 3. Actually, the answer is no. First, the black king takes 1 step closer. Yeah. And then if white insists, then the black king is safely in the square of the g-pawn, but the white king is not. It's actually black who wins the game. That was a very unpleasant surprise for Magnus. He actually spent some time. I don't have a habit of following people on live cam. I'm a chess player myself. I know how it is. It's difficult to hide your emotions, and I personally hate the idea that I would have a camera trained on me for the whole 4 hours, 6 hours while I'm playing the game. People, who are good at lip reading would probably be appalled, at my foul language. All that the words are never spoken, right? They just... But they can be lip read. Anyway, so I didn't want to do this, right? But I could tell that Magnus was unhappy here. Well, because of this g5 idea and the black king going back into the square of the g-pawn, he simply cannot win this endgame. So he plays rook b6, but try this. Kind of a backup plan, but it's not enough to win the game. And we all played this, which is the right move. Not allowing white to operate freely there and bring the king to b5. So then this, and now, very nice reply. King e7. Totally abandoning the knight, but stepping away from the pin. Nothing else for white to do, I guess, and play rook takes c6. I looked at king there, but honestly, I don't know if white should even be attempting to play for a win here. Yes, he's got himself a passed pawn, but f4 is about to fall. Then the remaining pawn, h-pawn, is not good enough to win the game anyway. Wrong color promotion square. And the black knight is not going to be that far away from the c-pawn. And aside of all that, there is this move. So the rook becomes active. Actually, I would prefer to be black here. I find white's position is uncomfortable, rather clumsy. Okay. I take your advice about swearing. Better not to swear in public. But, it's so difficult to keep your emotions in check, during a chess game. Anyways, so this line wasn't good. So Magnus went for this. He doesn't really have any advantage here. He knew that, of course. No, his king is also cut off. I mean, it's coming to help the pawn, but... Well, it cannot push the black king away, and the black king is so close to the c-pawn. Obviously, a standard pattern of counterattack. That's what they do. Magnus decided to force a draw here, and he did it in a pretty way. He gave up 2 pawns, but now the c-pawn is about to queen. The black rook cannot easily return to stop it. The king's cut off. Came this, and now thematic move king b2. It's enough for a draw, not enough for a win. Check. They agree to a draw. The black rook will always return to come back. Alright. Why didn't Magnus win this game? Why? Tell me. He did everything by the book, his own script, which he basically wrote, no, I don't know, 7 years ago? Maybe even before that. I mean, he did tell Garry Kasparov to take a hike, and he said, I have my own vision of chess. Kasparov told him, you have to study openings and be ahead of everyone else in opening theory and win games out of the gate using your superior preparation. Magnus said, thanks, but no thanks. Played his own chess, became undisputed #1 player in the world, and kept it already for 6 years. I'm not sure. You guys can check it. I'm always fuzzy on dates and facts. Why didn't he win this game? MVL, yes, MVL learned. These guys, they had no choice. Now, ignoring this and didn't work out for them very well. Time and again, MVL lost a very tough game in the objectively drawn Rook-N game. At the end of the 2015 Grand Chess Tour, the last tournament, London Chess Classic, MVL, there was 3 people in the race, not only for that tournament, for the overall thing, which was $100,000. And MVL came very close. He actually defeated Giri in the first stage of the Blitz playoff, and then he was to play Magnus, right? And he lost the objectively drawn Rook-N game. More difficult, obviously, than this one. Well, Magnus did have an advantage in reality, but a draw was there. By now, every and each of those top guys remembers his losses to Magnus, following the same pattern. They had no choice but to improve. And besides, they got some inspiration from Sergei Karyakin, who made it the centerpiece of his entire match strategy. He simply refused to lose. He played he had some bad positions, some worse positions. He defended to the bitter end, and he saved a lot of them. Actually, the key game that he lost, and lost his chance to become a world champion, sort of followed this pattern, but it also featured Karyakin's failure to find the perpetual check. Okay, that's the game that allowed Magnus to even the score. And then when they played the rapid chess, Magnus actually won a rather sharp game with black, where it was mostly middle game play with mutual weaknesses and all that. But Karyakin showed that it's possible. If you're physically strong and mentally tough, then you can survive against Magnus' strategy. Well, they're already halfway there. Once they believe in this, they're going to be drawing these games. How is that going to impact Magnus? It has already impacted him. I mentioned the 60% score. That's not what he had back in 2011 or 12. Yeah, Magnus is strong, and he will probably, given a position like this, he will win his share. But what's his share now? Used to be 2 out of 3, if not more. Now maybe 1 out of 3. Some games he's going to have black, some games won't work out. In the end, 60%. Which is still leading position, but not a far cry. That's what these guys, I believe, are working on now. I'm not privy to their feelings. Currently, I'm not training any of these guys. And actually, I'm glad, because I have time to sit there and talk with you. But I have a feeling that they're working on it. They're working on their stamina, and they simply refuse to give Magnus this extra half points that Magnus feels entitled to. All right. How is Magnus going to respond to this? I really don't know. Even for a great player, this kind of changes don't come easy. Recently, I wrote an article about Capablanca's games in the Nimza Indian defense for ChessBase. It was published on ChessBase news page. You can still probably find it in archives. What I meant to say there, that Capablanca was the best player in the world champion, undisputed. There were no ratings then, but nobody doubted. By basically playing the black side of the Queen's Gambit decline. Never losing there, winning sometimes. Yeah. And then he had that fateful match in Buenos Aires with Alekin. What Alekin did, he didn't try to avoid this. No, he played d4 throughout the entire match. He was able to do, maybe even better, what Karyakin tried to do. He was prepared to fight the great champion in his territory. And he was able to win this match. Of course, it was a titanic struggle, 34 games. You can read about this. Actually, Carlsen's hair, I think it's okay. I don't know why people make such a big deal out of this. I think one picture I didn't like when he tried to brush his hair quite aggressively, and it kind of came out strange. But if he just lets it grow, whatever. Yeah, let's have him in this Magnus the Barbarian look. I think he would look cool. Anyway, so talking about Capablanca. So that's what Capablanca did. And he figured, okay, now I have to get back. And he knew, of course, that getting a return match, not going to be easy. So he traveled to Europe again, plunged into those tournaments. And even took an apartment in Paris. And played, by then standards, almost non-stop. 28, 29. Didn't show his domination over others, and tried to change his style, or at least his openings. He didn't really change his style, the openings. Started playing Nimza Indian, and I analyzed these games, and if you see an article, well, the results were quite a mixed bag. Kappa didn't do very well over there. Well, Kappa... Now, what do you expect Magnus to do now? This doesn't work anymore, at least it doesn't work to the extent he wants. So now it's, let's abandon all this and start studying bishop g5 against the Najdorf. Analyze with computers, try to play sacrificial lines. I don't know. Maybe he can insist on this pattern and just break down their opponent's resistance. I suspect he's gonna do the latter. He's just gonna try harder, and look deeper, but essentially he will stay within the frame of his game plan. But I'm only guessing. All right, guys. Now, what do we do now? To the second part of our show. Let's move on to the Vulgar Gashimov Memorial. Kappa and Alekin jump to present day, which would fare. I cannot tell, computers, everything, it's not just computers, everything there would just affect their lives. I don't know where they would be. I don't believe that you can take, people, the living people, out of their element, and I don't know, maybe they would have gone insane. I don't know, time travel is still science fiction. Well, I don't know how a person would react being moved, 100 years in the future. Speaking of myself, if somebody just kidnapped me, just right out of high school, circa 1975 Soviet Union, and threw me in this day and age, I would probably freak out. I would probably would need some serious psychiatric help. Look at all these things around us. Well, cell phones, computers. Well, I can't really speculate on all this. I cannot separate the games of the player from the personality. Maybe if you talk style, I don't know what Capablanca's style. Alekin seemed to be more open to different ideas, and he simply played more openings and more structures. After all, he was a converted e4 player to d4. Capablanca also played both e4 and d4, but there are choices. Maybe Alekin was more of a modern player, but hey, he was a little younger and he was the next champion. But, strength-wise, I don't know. This kind of speculation. Well, speaking of people who were famous in the past. Hang on a second. Something is wrong here. I need to... Somehow the blitzing is glitching on me a little bit. I'm trying to open another PGN and it's just not giving me what I want. 1 second. I'll try a little harder. Okay, the Shamkir Memorial is the Shamkir Gashimov Memorial in Shamkir. Vugar Gashimov, obviously, you've heard of him, you probably saw his games, was immensely talented Azerbaijani player who arguably could have been, nobody knows how far he could have gone, but unfortunately he had incurable disease and it took its toll, he had to take breaks, and even in his short career, and finally he succumbed to his illness, and it's been already 4 years or 5 years since he died. Okay. Now, they remember Vugar in Azerbaijan. This tournament is a premier event. And when it started 4 years ago, and then Kasparov came up with his Grand Chess Tour thing, a logical choice would be to include the Gashimov Memorial into the series of classical tournaments. Norway Chess, Gashimov, I think it would be that order, or the other way around. Then Sinquefield Cup in St. Louis, and finally the London Classic. No, it wasn't going to happen because of Kasparov's sunny personality. He totally burned his bridges in Azerbaijan very many years ago. They made some political statements and all that, Okay, I understand he probably had reasons to do this because, Armenian community living in Baku, and then after collapse of the Soviet Union, and then a border war somewhere in the disputed region of Nagorno-Karabakh, and I guess the Armenians were not welcome in Baku anymore, and obviously this Christianity versus Islam, whatever. But fact of the matter is, it's your choice. If you bring your politics into your business, maybe you'll gain something, but for sure you will lose a lot too. So Kasparov cast his lot over there, and therefore he hasn't been back to Azerbaijan, since 91. Whatever, and so he couldn't bring that tournament into his brainchild. But the tournament persevered, it survived, and even if some scheduling conflicts probably prevented some players from playing there, we haven't seen Magnus Carlsen back there. He did play in some previous editions, but the tournament is still quite good. So the top player before the start was Wesley So. I don't know, awful or not. It's not the views that awful. It's what you do about them. I can have my own thoughts, that I would not share with you guys or whatever, and you won't know. Maybe I'm to the right of Attila the Hun, or maybe I'm to the left from Che Guevara. I'm just not going to talk about it. That's the difference. I don't know. Well, you're probably right about, as a product of the Soviet Union, there, for the religion to take root, after pretty much 70 years of a total separation of a church, from social life of people, it is pretty hard, yeah. I don't know. When every time I see another patriarch of the Russian Orthodox Church, chatting up with Putin over there, I understand all that, but it's just PR. I still have relatives and friends in Russia, and I don't think the Russians are going super religious, anytime soon. And why should the Azerbaijani then? Same thing, right? But anyway, we're veering away from the stuff. Let's talk chess. Anyway, so what was I talking about? No, right, so the Shamkir tournament, right? Tournament in Shamkir. Shamkir is a small town. It's not in Baku, capital city. That's where Gashimov was from. And all this great stuff, like remembering the great player and all that, in some ways they owe it to him. Because Vugar, I never heard from anybody that Vugar was a bad guy or whatever, or difficult to get along with. Karyakin, of all people, many times went on the record, he said they were big friends with Vugar. And yet, somehow he was always a second fiddle there, if not a third fiddle. With all his talent over there, I don't think he got a whole lot of support. Maybe the Azerbaijani sports and chess authorities found it a little embarrassing that they had a guy there, with kind of medical condition that he would have to drop out of tournaments, so can suddenly, just faint, at tournament hall. Those things happen. It wasn't Vugar's fault. It's just medical condition. But one way or another, I don't think when Vugar was alive, they treated him very nicely. But at least they're making up now, years after he died. So they had a nice tournament together. Wesley So is there, Vladimir Kramnik, Sergei Karyakin, of course Shakhriyar Mamedyanov. You probably saw what happened today, right? The key game was Kramnik with white against Mamedyanov. Kramnik was at 50% after losing to Wesley So in the previous round. Then they had a day off. Kramnik refused to go play soccer. He said, I'm too old, I'm probably gonna die over there on soccer field. So he spent all day resting and preparing, and then he went out to beat Mamedyanov and catch up with him, level with him, because Mamedyanov was +2. What happened today was quite the opposite. Mamedyanov won, and now he looks like the runaway winner of the tournament with +3. Although, considering that Wesley So is on a 2-game winning streak, beating 2 of the best Russian players, Kramnik and then Karyakin, both with white. Maybe Wesley can make this happen, Maybe. There's still 3 games to be played. Yeah, okay, let's talk chess. So anyway, probably you guys you probably saw the game, so you can look at notes somewhere. I chose this game. It was played actually in round 5. It wasn't round 6 game. It was just before the rest day. Karyakin had white against Topalov. So let's talk about Topalov. Is there anyone present, who dislikes Topalov, the chess player? Not Topalov, the person. Anybody who finds Topalov's style and his games unconvincing, not quite solid, or anything like that. Mamedyanov always loses to Kramnik. I don't really recall that. I think Mamedyanov always loses to Carlson. Mamedyanov, Kramnik, they had a huge battle in in that Khanty-Mansiysk candidates tournament. And Mamedyanov was winning, and indeed he made a horrible blunder and lost the winning position to Kramnik. But I don't really recall their head-to-head. So we like Topalov, right? Attractive style, attacking player, risk taker. I know there were accusations of cheating over there that were leveled at him after his fantastic performance in San Luis, where he won that. Now it became, I don't want to get into this. And the toilet scandal in Elista when he played the Kramnik. Obviously, there were some other people involved, managers, spokesmen, whatever they are. I mean, I'm talking about chess. I played with Selin, and I played him 3 times. I really enjoyed playing him, and we didn't hang out much because Veselin is a somewhat reserved person, and also during tournaments he likes to focus on his chess. But I always liked him, and I admired his chess. And then, of course, the last 2 candidate tournaments were, I think both times he finished last, particularly the Moscow thing in 2016. He was the only guy providing people with plus score, right? He ended up with -5. Dead last, 2.5 points below the group of people at 50%. Veselin said, no mas, I'm not gonna play for World Championship anymore. But obviously he didn't quit, right? So he went through Grand Chess Tour last year, played all these tournaments, didn't really... I mean, he had some, maybe one good tournament, but part of it was Rapid and Blitz, where, honestly, he was never really as strong as his contemporaries Anand and Kramnik. And he didn't do well in those events, Paris and Leuven, Belgium. Now he dropped a lot of rating points. He had a horrible tournament at the London Classic. He's out of this consideration, that consideration, no Grand Chess Tour. And he ignored the Grand Prix thing, so he's not playing for World Championship. Topalov looked evil. I don't know, no, the intensity on his face, but no, I don't know. Well, those professional photographers, they probably catch this moment. They can make me look evil. And I'm your friend here. I'm a Russian schoolboy. But with some work, they can make me look like I'm They did it right to O.J. Simpson. I still remember that picture. They put on the cover of Time magazine. It was, I think, before the trial. He looked like, Jack the Ripper squared, Okay, anyway, regardless, though, okay, once again, something drags me away from chess. Anyway, so Topalov, right? But he loves chess, right? Why should he quit? There is so much he can do. He can play tournaments, he can bring us beautiful games. He just has to take it easy, not to spend too much time away from his family. No, wife, 2 young children. And I was glad to see him there. And he won a fantastic game against Wojtaszek. But it is what it is. Topalov said it himself. I don't work on chess anymore. I have a little bit of the old preparation left, but it's not. Now he faces Karyakin. Karyakin had a bad start of the tournament. He's actually not having a good tournament, but maybe that's Karyakin's game plan. If I understand anything about Sergei Karyakin, I think he simply decided that the rating now doesn't matter at all. He is qualified for the candidates by virtue of being the loser of the World Championship match. And he said that I'm fully preparing for one tournament only, the candidates tournament of 2018. And I want to be back playing Carlsen again. Now, if somewhat carefree or whatever this attitude during regular tournaments is involved in this, well, so be it. It's not up to me to judge. But in this game, Karyakin, who was at -1, was poised, I guess, to try against Topalov. And now this. Okay, you Topalov experts. Have you seen him playing the Karakan before? Topalov did not win today against Mamedyarov. Topalov won today against Elyanov. It was actually quite a nice game. Elyanov he beat. Mamedyarov is the leader of the tournament with no losses. Mamedyarov beat Kramnik today. Mamedyarov is a local player from Azerbaijan. They're a #1 player. Elyanov is from Ukraine. Yeah. But Topalov playing c6. I'm used to, the Najdorf. He played also a lot of e5, but the main thing was the Najdorf. Is it like that now Topalov feels like I just don't have it enough in my prep to play the Najdorf against one of the top e4 experts, which Karyakin is? It's a bad sign, right? Because Topalov didn't used to back down from anything. He would play his King's Indian against Kramnik time and again, when Kramnik was the beast against King's Indian. And he would play his Najdorfs against anyone. Karakan. This was easy to guess. Most top players now, they like to play the advanced variation. Karyakin's no exception. He had played it before. Now, and we expect bishop f5 and then whatever. c5. Now, I am familiar with this move, very much so. I played it a long time ago, and well, part of my decision to play it was I was trying to surprise my opponent. It was my opponent in the first round of the inaugural FIDE Knockout World Championship, and it was, as I thought, was a beatable for me opponent, the German Grandmaster Stefan Kindermann. And my preparation was c5. Now, the difference between c5 and bishop f5, that black may not even be trying to move the bishop outside the pawn chain. But all the same, he has to realize he's playing the French down a tempo because of the extra move. Truth to tell, yeah, on knight f3, then you can come out bishop g4. I already played that too. And there are some things about dc5. Now black leaves the bishop there, but he is trying to win the pawn back, which white can hold on to, but no, theory considers this whole thing acceptable for black. a3. Was that surprise for Topalov? I don't think so. It was played in Russian tournaments. Maybe the authorship belongs to Yan Nepomniachtchi. But Karyakin obviously was aware of that. It's an interesting move. White is not trying to save this pawn. He is actually ready to play the French structure. And he has one extra tempo in the line that otherwise d takes c5. It's not considered very good for white. Coming from the advanced French, nobody takes on c5. They all play c3. What makes it work here is that one extra tempo gifted to white because of the two moves with the c pawn. Obviously, e5 pawn. We go back to the times of Nimzovich, who famously studied these positions because he was a great French player and also played against the French very well. He said that sometimes white's strategy is to trade off those pawns and occupy the squares with the pieces. So one thing coming out of this a3 is, okay, I play a few moves here. b4. So as soon as the attack comes against e5, white brings the bishop to protect his pawn. From the French, I used to see the bishop coming to f4 and then to g3, where it also serves the purpose of protecting this pawn. But the bishop is considerably less active on g3. Well, truth to tell, it has no other purpose but saving this pawn. Here the bishop kind of supports the pawn and extends this diagonal. No, there are some other lines, you know. Well, for example, here oops, let me go back. Here you can play this, not 97, say knight c6. I know, b4 there. Black, for example, can play f6 immediately. That's not so easy, though. White can try to maintain the control over the e5. Square, actually. The pawn is going to be traded, but the square will remain. There is a reason why you're teaching and I'm watching. No, looking. Well, actually, I don't want to go into details, you know, but no, I have some hobbies, you know, when I'm far from being teacher. And no. And besides, there is still a lot for me to learn in chess. I mean, that's okay. It doesn't really... I don't believe, you know, that it sets us apart, you know. I think it rather brings us together. No, looking at this, but it's a French position. But what White got, you know, White never gets out of the straight up French because of that extra move with the c pawn. Anyway, let's follow the game because otherwise it will take us too long. Now White sets this whole thing up, and now Topalov plays knight f4. I didn't see it, but I was told, it was reported to me, when this move was played, the official commentator, who sits right there in Shamkir in the press room with the computer and access to all the games and the live camera on him, is the great Lubo Ljubojevic, the Yugoslav star of the 1970s and the 80s, and of course representing Serbia now. I love Lubo. Year and a half ago when I visited Belgrade, you know, I remember our conversations and the walk. He was our guide, you know. We walked for hours, you know, in Belgrade. And I mean, we had a lot of talks and all that. Lubo is a great guy, you know. I really love Lubo. So he's there, right? Now, you might say the guy is 66 years old and he doesn't really play in tournaments, and every once in a while he plays maybe 1 or 2 tournaments a year, usually small ones. But he hasn't lost his touch when it comes to understanding dynamic factors. Guess what Lubo said? He said, this is horrible. You cannot spend that much time to trade your minor piece, even for the opponent's best piece. Indeed. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Yeah, that's on top of that tempo that was gifted with the c-pawn moves. No. Didn't Topalov understand that? No, of course he did. Well, problem is that the alternative, which would be to play f6, appeared quite risky because while Black, of course, now has the center comes under assault. The rook will be on e1 on that. The king side, maybe the white queen will make a surprise visit to the h6 square. This is not really reliable. So he went for knight f4. I don't think Topalov was particularly well prepared to play this position. I had a feeling that somehow the possibility of the move a3 was not accounted for in his preparation. Oh, you say you never played the French, you always play the Caracan and the Sicilian. This started as the Caracan, right? Watch this. What are you gonna do here? You think everybody is gonna play knight c3 against you? Seriously. Theo, 28, 28 awful. Whatever, I can't say. But my point is, that this brings people to some kind of French structures. There is nothing you can do about it. This is currently, well, maybe White's main weapon. Anyways. Now, you look at this and you think, but there's sort of a semi-close structure, and how important is this moves? No, maybe, arguably, they're not as important in some kind of King's Gambit, positions that Morphy played. But modern players, they have great sense and initiative, and you give them time, they'll find something to do. And particularly that move c4 strikes me as a great decision from Karyakin. So he hits the d5 pawn, which black is in no position to protect. And besides, of course, black had to worry about the squeeze after b5, c5, and so on. When this happens, white gains more space. The pawn is still on e5. And there is a square behind the pawn, now available for the white knight. What black has on his side is the bishop pair. But guys, the bishop pair is a long-term advantage. What white is playing for is dynamic short-term advantages. Getting the queen out, that's the best attacking square. Follow through with the knight. While black is still struggling with development. Probably even in his best days, Vasilin Topalov was not the best defender in such positions. He would much prefer to be on the other side. I don't think he felt very ecstatic about his prospects here. He did make an interesting effort. He played this move. And when white moved the queen away, he played a nice move, bishop c6. He offered that g7 pawn to be taken. Now, bishop bites on e5, that is true, but it also supports this pawn and extends the influence of this pawn. You will see it in the game. Now, while the pawn is on e5, that knight will come to e4, and it will come to d6, and e5 is nicely supported. Or worse yet for black, to f6, with some sacrifice. That bishop there, makes the whole thing stronger. Sometimes you just take what your pieces are capable of. I give you one advice. If you look at the games of real experts in positional play, you'll be surprised to see that they, rather than constantly trying to improve their pieces, as it's presented to you in many books on positional play, you cannot find a book on positional play which would not feature the famous game between Karpov and Spassky, where Karpov played his knight to b1, moved the knight to d2, and then to some greener pastures. Those are other exceptions. What positional players are good at, they're good at dealing with the hand that they have, what was dealt to them. They somehow find plans that stem out of the position of their pieces. Not only pawn structure, that's kind of like 1800 or maybe 2000 level. Okay, this pawn structure calls for that. I tell you what, I would love, to run a test, and many people thereof say that class A level, maybe if they're experts, they would get it right. Class A players, which is 1800 to 2000, and just see how many of them would play c4 in this position. c4 is the right move. But look at Topalov, he offers this pawn. His plan, of course, is to play this. Now the pawn is pinned, so black has to play that, and then the great move knight f5. Well, it's a pawn sacrifice, and white can probably keep his extra pawn, but the great activity of black pieces. The pressure on the g file, the pinned knight on f3. Yeah, that's what we decided in the beginning of my show. There will be no, okay, it's not exactly swearing, but I mean, let's just avoid, any kind of innuendo here. Don't forget, that Leon is watching. Leon is always there. Besides, like it's one thing, when you, indeed, as he says, butcher a random language, it's one thing. But I let you in on a secret. Internet Chess Club is Italian. You want to mess with him? I don't think so. All right, so Karyakin refuses to take on G7. Absolutely right about this. And he plays the move Rook D1. Now, Black does this. And now the star move. I mean, yeah, we look at Knight e4, but then Black will be happy to trade. And then he gets his Knight f5 and he castles. And indeed, sometimes White may find this position impossible to improve. The bishop is, as you pointed out, Thiva, is restricted. And Black has only good pieces left. And bishop active, the good knight on f5. But that's because of the mistake. Well, Karyakin played the right move. His idea is to bring the knight to e4 and make sure that he takes back with the knight. Keeping the queen in an aggressive position and getting the knight through to d6 and f6. Now, Topalov played what I would say was a principled move, queen takes e5. He simply didn't want to growl, right? You play this, he goes over there, whatever, you trade, then you do this. He can bring the knight to d6. That alone constitutes White's advantage. Possibly there is more. There are rook lifts possible to g3 or h3. There is knight f6 check. He took the pawn. Principal decision. Yeah, of course. I'm just big on stereotypes, right? Come on, I'm messing with you people. Seriously, Queen takes e5. No, right, it's principled. You don't want to let your opponent to have a free run at your position at no cost. You take pawns like this. Realistically, Black's one move away from getting the king out of there. But one move sometimes is eternity. Look at this shot. What to do? Went h5. An attempt to dislodge that queen. But then this. So White's still keeping the knight protected. So now logically we should follow up and hit that queen with the knight, right? So we do it. Problem is this. You take, you're threatening mate, but your bishop is gone on the very next move. Black does not have the time to recapture, because knight e4, knight d6 would just destroy his position. That knight check on d6 would force the black king into discovered check. There will be no defense. Otherwise, what to do? Queen is 7, right? Takes. Take back. No, right, we've seen this before. There it comes. White doesn't need to get distracted and take this pawn, not just yet. It's better to threaten to take and follow through with knight f6 mate. So came bishop takes. Yet another tempo. Now it's a textbook. Initiative growing into an attack. Luba saw it coming. Luba saw it coming after the move knight f4. There is no better vindication, to Lyubovich's assessment of the move knight f4 as the continuation of the game. It was really remarkable. Takes. Okay, this seems forced, right? Okay. Actually, queen f4. People said that Topalov missed what happened in the game. But I'll tell you what, if there wasn't for the shot that Karyakin landed, if he simply played queen f4, by just indirectly protecting this bishop, because there would be mate, White would still have, in my opinion, just totally decisive attack. There is nowhere to hide this king. You can't castle long anymore, can't castle short. Some shot on e6 will be the end of it. But speaking of the shots on e6, right away. Where have I seen movie like this before? Double check, single mate. Knight takes e6 truly is a killing shot. Now White's ahead in material because he won the exchange. Something may be happening here with some checks, rook f8 at the right moment. Nah, Sergei didn't need that bishop. He moved away, nicely protected his rook. Forced. Even the bishop is not needed. White came to the 7th with the unstoppable threat of mate. And this was the game. Only highlight of Sergei Karyakin's tournament, but I'm sure he's happy to have even that. Well, you mentioned today that Topalov won. Apparently, the day off. They say they're going to play soccer, I'm sure Topalov played, I remember we played in YKNZ. Veselin wanted to score goals, a couple of times he came so close, Once I set him up so nicely, but maybe, there was just, maybe the ball through was a couple of inches away. Ay. He loves to score. But he used his day off wisely, and he won a nice game today against Pavel Ulyanov. So once again, thinking of Topalov's chess, there are going to be some wins, there are going to be some losses, but all in all, he deserved it, right? I mean, he fought against the best players in the world already for 20 plus years. First time I saw him was 94, Moscow Olympiad. He was already board one, having defeated Kasparov, I think, twice. Prior to that, earlier that same year, board one for Bulgarian team. Yeah. Let him play there, and I'm always happy to see Veselin Topalov. Alright, guys, I think I'm running out of steam. Well, today, if you excuse me, I'll probably keep it exactly at 90 minutes our show. I had a real long day and I need to tend to some issues. But anyway, looking ahead, keep following this tournament, Gashimov Memorial. Mamediarov is in first place, full point ahead of Mickey Adams, another guy I didn't mention today. Mickey Adams and Wesley So, who's making big inroads to reinforce his second position in the rating list. That's important, of course, because of the candidates' qualification implications. Top two players with the rating list will go through to the candidates. It's not the current rating, it's rather an average of all published ratings, all 12 ratings in this year in 2017. Somebody has to do math on that. But anyway, so Wesley is there with plus score, and now Topalov. I think Topalov is yet to play Mamedyarov. I mean, I like Shakhriyar too, but I would really love to see Veselin winning this tournament. Thank you so much, guys, and you have yourself a good night. And I'll talk to you again sometime in May. Not next week. Sorry about that. I have to take some time off. We will see. Most likely on the 11th. I don't know what the topic is gonna be, but no, chess never sleeps. Something's gonna come up. Have a good one, guys. Goodbye.